I'll never forget the way she looked at me that night, her eyes catching the dim light of the living room, sharp and steady like she was seeing right through me. My friend's mom, Mrs. Lars Clara, as she'd later insist I call her Lendon close, her voice low and deliberate, and said, "Let's keep this between us, okay?" The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy after a party winds down and everyone's gone home. Her words hung in the air, and I knew right then that something was about to change in a way I couldn't undo. It started earlier that evening, a Friday night in late June, when my buddy Nate threw one of his usual get-togethers at his place. I'd been to dozens of these over the years. Same crew, same vibe. Nate's house was the spot because his mom didn't care if we got a little loud or snuck a few beers as long as we didn't trash the place or do anything too stupid. She was always around, floating in and out, making sure we had snacks or checking if anyone needed a ride home. Clara was cool like that, younger than most moms, maybe in her early 40s, with this easy confidence that made you feel like she had everything under control. She'd laugh at our dumb jokes, throw in a sarcastic comment or two, and then disappear to let us do our thing. I never thought much of it. She was just Nate's mom. That night, though, something felt off from the start. The party was smaller than usual. Just a handful of us, my Nate, his girlfriend Sarah, our friend Derek, and a couple others from our old high school crew. We were all in our early 20s, some of us still figuring out what came next after community college or dead-end jobs. The music was loud, the drinks were flowing, and we were sprawled out in the living room playing cards and talking over each other. Clara was in the kitchen most of the night, popping in to refill the chip bowl or tease Nate about something. I caught her glancing my way a couple times, but I didn't think anything of it. I mean, why would I? She was Nate's mom. As the night went on, people started peeling off. Derek had work early, so he left around 11 o'clock. Sarah wasn't feeling great, so Nate offered to drive her home, which wasn't unusual. He was always looking out for her. The others trickled out not long after, and by midnight, it was just me and Clara in the house. I wasn't in a rush to leave. I'd had a few drinks, nothing crazy, but enough that I didn't want to drive just yet. Plus, I figured I'd wait for Nate to get back so we could hang out a bit longer. Clara didn't seem to mind. She was tidying up, stacking empty cans, and wiping down the counter, humming along to the playlist, still looping in the background. Was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone when she came over and sat down across from me in the armchair. She had a glass of wine in her hand, and her hair, which she usually kept up in a messy bun, was loose, falling over her shoulders. She looked relaxed, but there was this intensity in her eyes that made me sit up a little straighter. "You're sticking around, huh?" she said, her tone light, but with an edge I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, just waiting for Nate," I said, shrugging. "Figured I'd sober up a bit before I head out." She nodded, taking a sip of her wine. "Smart. You're always the responsible one, aren't you?" I laughed, not sure what she meant. "I don't know about that. Just don't want a ticket." She smiled, but it wasn't her usual easy grin. It was slower, like she was studying me. "You're a good kid, you know that? Always looking out for Nate, keeping him out of trouble." I shifted in my seat, feeling a little uneasy. I mean, he's my best friend. Got to have his back. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees, the wine glass dangling between her fingers. "You ever think about what you're doing with your life, though? I mean, really think about it." Question caught me off guard. I wasn't used to adults asking me stuff like that, especially not Clara. She'd always been more about joking around than getting deep. I guess," I said, fumbling for an answer. "I'm working at the auto shop saving up. Maybe I'll go back to school or something. Haven't figured it out yet." She tilted her head like she was weighing my words. "You're young. You've got time. But you're different. You know, you're not like Nate or the others. You've got something steady about you." I didn't know what to say to that. Felt like a compliment. But there was something in the way she said it that made my stomach twist. Like she was seeing something in me I didn't even know was there. I mumbled a thanks and took a sip of my water just to have something to do with my hands. That's when she got up and moved to the couch, sitting closer than I expected, like right next to me, but close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral mixed with the wine. She set her glass down on the coffee table and turned to face me. "Can I ask you something?" she said, her voice quieter now. Sure, I said, trying to sound casual even though my heart was starting to beat a little faster. She hesitated like she was choosing her words carefully. You ever keep secrets? I mean real secrets. The kind you don't tell anyone. Not even Nate. I swallowed, not sure where this was going. I guess depends on the secret. She nodded like that was the answer she expected. Then she leaned in a little closer, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. What if I told you something and I needed you to keep it quiet? Could you do that? I felt a prickle of unease, but I nodded. Yeah, good. What's up? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached out and put her hand on my arm just for a second, her fingers warm against my skin. Let's keep this between us. Okay? She said, and that's when the air in the room felt like it shifted. It's like the walls were closing in just a little. I don't know why I didn't leave right then. I could have grabbed my keys, made some excuse about needing to get home, but I didn't. I stayed because part of me wanted to know what she was going to say next, even though another part of me was screaming that this was a bad idea. She leaned back, picking up her wine glass again, but her eyes never left mine. You know, I've been on my own for a while now, she said. Since Nate's dad left, it's just been me and him, and it's a lot sometimes. I nodded, not sure what to say. I knew Nate's dad had bailed when we were in high school, but Nate didn't talk about it much and I never pressed him. Clara didn't talk about it either. At least not with me. It's hard, you know. She went on, being the one who has to keep everything together. Nate's a good kid, but he's Nate. He's not exactly thinking about the big picture. I'm just trying to make sure he's okay. That we're okay. I get that, I said, my voice sounding small. You're a good mom, she laughed. But it wasn't a happy sound. Am I? Some days I'm not so sure. Some days I feel like I'm just pretending, hoping no one notices I don't have it all figured out. I didn't know what to say to that. I'd never seen Clara like this raw, unguarded. She always seemed so put together, like nothing could shake her. But now, sitting there in the dim light, she looked vulnerable, and it made me feel something I couldn't quite name. She took another sip of her wine, then set the glass down again. You're easy to talk to, she said, her voice softening. I don't know why, but I feel like I can tell you things. Things I don't tell anyone else. My mouth went dry. Like what? I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know. She looked at me for a long moment like she was deciding something. Then she said, I'm lonely, you know? Just alone, lonely. There's a difference. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to that? I just sat there, my hands clasped tight in my lap, waiting for her to keep going. I don't expect you to understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're young. You've got your whole life ahead of you. But when you get to my age, you start to realize how much you've missed. How many things you thought you'd have time for, but you don't. I nodded even though I didn't fully get it. I could see the weight in her eyes, though. The kind of weight that comes from carrying something for too long. I'm sorry, I said, because it felt like the right thing to say. She shook her head. Don't be. It's not your fault. It's just life. She paused, then added. But sometimes I wonder what it would be like to feel something again. Something real. My heart was pounding now, and I wasn't sure why. The way she was looking at me, the way her voice wrapped around those words, it felt like she was saying something without saying it. I shifted on the couch, suddenly hyper-aware of how close she was sitting, how quiet the house was. Clara, I started, but she cut me off. You don't have to say anything, she said, her hand reaching out again, this time resting on my knee. I needed to say that. I need you to keep it to yourself. Can you do that? I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah, I won't say anything. She smiled, a small, almost sad smile. Good. I knew I could trust you. The rest of the night is kind of a blur. Nate got back not long after and Clara went back to being her usual self, teasing him about taking so long, asking if we needed anything before she headed upstairs. I stayed for maybe another half hour, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. When I finally left, driving home through the dark, her words kept echoing in my head. Let's keep this between us. Okay? The next few weeks were weird. I kept going over to Nate's place like usual, But every time I saw Clara was like there was this invisible thread between us. Something only we knew about. Didn't bring it up again, not directly. But there were moments, little glances, a brush of her hand when she passed me a drink that made me wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing, or if there was more she wasn't saying. I started noticing things about her I hadn't before. The way she moved, confident but tired, like she was carrying the weight of the world but making it look easy. The way she'd laugh at Nate's dumb jokes but then catch my eye like we were sharing some private understanding. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was reading too much into a late-night conversation. But then there was the time she asked me to help her with something in the garage. It was a Saturday afternoon and Nate was out with Sarah. I stopped by, too. Grab a jacket I'd left there and Clara was in the garage trying to move some boxes. "Hey, you're strong," she said, waving me over. "Give me a hand with these." I didn't think twice. I went over, started stacking boxes where she pointed. It was normal stuff, just helping out. But then when we were done, she leaned against the workbench, wiping her hands on her jeans, and said, "You're always so helpful. I don't know what I'd do without you around." It was a simple thing to say, but the way she said it, the way her eyes lingered on mine made my stomach flip. I mumbled something about it being no big deal and got out of there as fast as I could without seeming rude. That's how it went for a while. Just these small moments that didn't add up to anything concrete, but left me feeling like I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand. Didn't tell anyone. Not Nate, not Derek, not even my brother, who I usually tell everything. I promised Clara I wouldn't. And besides, what was there to tell? She'd said she was lonely, that she'd looked at me in a way that made my heart race. It sounded stupid when I tried to put it into words. But then there was the night at the diner. It was maybe a month after that first conversation, and Nate and I had gone to grab food after a long day. Clara showed up out of nowhere, said she'd been running errands, and saw our cars in the lot. She slid into the booth next to me, her shoulder brushing against mine, and ordered a coffee like it was the most normal thing in the world. Nate didn't seem to think anything of it, but I could barely focus on the conversation. Every time she moved, I felt it like a current running through me. When Nate got up to use the bathroom, she turned to me and said, "You've been quiet lately? Everything okay?" I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yeah, just, work and stuff." She raised an eyebrow like she didn't believe me. "You sure? You seemed distracted?" I didn't know how to answer that. Was I distracted? Yeah, but it was because of her and I couldn't exactly say that. So I just shrugged and said, "I'm good." She didn't push it, but as she sipped her coffee, her knee pressed against mine under the table just for a second, and I swear it wasn't an accident. When Nate came back, she was all smiles again, joking about how we needed to eat healthier or we'd end up like her, old and creaky. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something I wasn't sure I was ready for. I started finding excuses to go over to Nate's place more often. Even when I knew he wasn't home, I'd tell myself I was just checking in and seeing if Clara needed help with anything. Sometimes she did. Moving furniture, fixing a leaky faucet, stuff like that. Other times, she'd just offer me a drink and we'd talk about nothing and everything. She told me about her job at the hospital, how she'd wanted to be a nurse when she was younger, but life got in the way. I told her about the auto shop, how I liked working with my hands, but wasn't sure if it was what I wanted forever. It was easy talking to her. Too easy. One night after I'd helped her carry some groceries in, she poured us both a glass of wine and we sat at the kitchen table. Nate was out as usual and the house was quiet again. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked, swirling her glass. "Just getting out, starting over somewhere new." "Sometimes," I admitted, "but it's hard to imagine leaving. This is home, you know?" She nodded, but there was something far away in her eyes. I used to think that too, but sometimes I wonder if I stayed too long, if I missed my chance to, live. I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to tell her she wasn't stuck, that she could still do whatever she wanted. But the words felt hollow. Instead, I just said, "You're not that old, Clara. You've still got time." She laughed, but it was soft, almost bitter. "You're sweet, but time's a funny thing. It sneaks up on you." We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Then she reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "You're a good listener," she said. "I don't know what I'd do without these talks." I felt my face heat up and I pulled my hand back, trying to play it off with a laugh. "It's nothing, just glad I can help." She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You do more than you know." That was the first time I really let myself think it. That maybe this wasn't just in my head. Maybe she felt it too. Whatever it was. But the second I let that thought in, the guilt hit me like a truck. This was Nate's mom, my best friend's mom. What the hell was I doing? I started pulling back after that. I stopped going over as much, made excuses when Nate invited me to hang out. I told myself it was for the best, that I needed to get my head straight. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she'd looked at me that first night, the way her hand felt on mine, the way she'd said, "Let's keep this between us." It was like a loop in my head, playing over and over. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a random Tuesday and I hadn't been to Nate's in over a week. He texted me, said he was having a few people over. Nothing big, just to chill. I almost didn't go, but I figured avoiding him forever wasn't fair. When I got there, it was the usual sign: music, drinks, people sprawled out on the couch. Clara was there, too, but she was quieter than usual, sticking to the kitchen mostly. I tried not to look at her too much, but every time I did, our eyes met, and it was like a jolt. Around midnight, everyone started heading out. Nate said he was giving Sarah a ride again, and I said I'd stick around. Same as that first night. I told myself it was just to hang out with Nate when he got back. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. When the house was empty, Clara came in, too. The living room just like before. She didn't sit down this time, just stood there, leaning against the doorway, her arms crossed. "You've been avoiding me," she said, her voice calm but direct. I froze, caught off guard. "What?" "No, I've just been busy." She raised an eyebrow. "But don't lie to me. I know you." I didn't know what to say. She was right, but admitting it felt like stepping into something I couldn't come back from. "I'm not avoiding you," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on mine. "I'm not stupid. I know how this works. You're scared, and I don't blame you. But don't pretend you don't feel it, too." Heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst. "Feel what?" I said, but my voice cracked, giving me away. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over and sat down next to me, closer than she ever had before. "You're a good person," she said softly. "That's why this is hard. But I'm not asking you to do anything you don't want to do. I need to know I'm not crazy." I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as sand. "You're not crazy," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, and then she leaned in so close I could feel her breath on my face. "Then why does this feel so wrong?" She whispered, "I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was her. All I know is that 1 second we were sitting there frozen and the next her lips were on mine. It wasn't like anything I'd ever felt before. Soft and desperate and wrong all at once. My hands found her waist and hers were in my hair. And for a moment nothing else existed. But then I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway and reality crashed back in. We pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, staring at each other like we just woken up from a dream. "Nate," I said, my voice. She nodded, her face pale. "Go," she said. "Please." I grabbed my keys and was out the door before Nate even made it inside. I didn't look back. Didn't let myself think about what had just happened. I drove home, my hands shaking on the wheel, her words echoing in my head. "Let's keep this between us." Okay, that was 3 months ago. I haven't been back to Nate's place since. I've made every excuse I can think of and he's starting to ask questions. I don't know what to tell him. I don't know how to face him knowing what I did. Clara hasn't reached out and I haven't either. But I think about her every day. I think about that night, about the way she looked at me, about the way it felt to cross a line I can't uncross. I don't know what happens next. Part of me wants to pretend it never happened to go back to the way things were. But another part of me knows that's impossible because no matter what I do, I'll never forget the way she said those words. The way they've burned themselves into my mind. Let's keep this between us. Okay?